Let's take a look at the structure of a user story. A user story follows a 3C structure, and the first C is for card. And the card idea is pretty simple. People originally wrote user stories directly on 3x5-inch index cards or sticky notes, and the card, when first created, is sort of like an invitation to start a conversation. It isn't intended to capture all the information that makes up the requirement. In fact, we deliberately use small cards with limited space to promote brevity. A card should hold a few sentences that captures the essence or intent of a requirement, and it serves as a placeholder for more detailed discussions that will take place among the stakeholders, the product owner, and the development team. The story on a card usually follows a format like this. As some kind of user of the product, I can take some specific action so that I can derive some benefit. And so you essentially fill in the blanks for user role, action, and benefit. In other words, the written text of the story, the invitation to a conversation, must address the who, the what, and the why of the story. But Scrum doesn't dictate how stories should be written, so don't use this format where it doesn't make sense, where it's clearly not a user-facing story. With some technical tasks, this format might seem artificial or silly. For example, if an old version of a system is no longer supported, we need to upgrade to the latest version, we could use a different format, like this one. So upgrade the system to the latest version of Linux. Now the second C in the 3 C's stands for conversation. And the user story, when initially created, is simply a promise to have a conversation. The details of the requirement are exposed and communicated in that conversation among the development team, the product owner, and stakeholders. And just to clarify, the conversation for a story is not a one-time event, but rather an ongoing dialogue. There can be an initial discussion when the story is written, another when it's refined, another during estimation, and then another one during sprint planning, and during design and build and testing. And so the conversation happens on an ongoing basis because things can change. And the final C is confirmation. A user story also contains acceptance criteria. And this is used by the development team to better understand what to build and test, and by the product owner to confirm that the user story has been implemented to his or her satisfaction. So if the front of the story has a few lines describing the story, then the back of the card would then specify the conditions of satisfaction or the acceptance criteria. So it's important to note that this high-level acceptance test is not the only test that will be run when the story is being developed. In fact, for the handful of acceptance tests that are associated with a user story, the team will have many more tests at a detailed technical level. So those are the 3 C's. So in summary, user stories are crafted in a way that makes them understandable to both business people and technical people. They are structurally simple and they provide a great placeholder for a conversation. Now it's important to note that stories are not the only source of requirements. They can be used as a placeholder to which additional relevant details can be attached. So that might be a visual design or a detailed requirement, or a chart or a log file or anything that's relevant. Additionally, they can also be written at various levels of granularity and are easy to progressively refine. So let's take a moment to talk about level of granularity and abstraction. Now, user stories can be written at different levels of abstraction. So you can have large stories that are a few months in size that might span multiple releases. And people call these epics, sort of like the Lord of the Rings kind of large epics that was too large to fit into one movie. And similarly, we'd never be able to move an epic into a sprint because it's too big and not detailed enough. Instead, they're used as a container for the more detailed stories. And then you have stories that fit in a sprint, and they're called, well, stories, or sprintable stories, or implementable stories. And within a story, you can have tasks, and tasks are usually performed by only one person and typically take just a couple of hours to complete. And the main difference between a task and a story is that a story has to be delivered and a task doesn't. Or in other words, the product owner doesn't really care about the task. And when we get to the task level, we are really specifying the how to build something rather than the what to build, which is represented by the epics and the stories. So how can you tell when a story is sprintable or ready for a sprint to be picked up by the development team? So it's a good practice for the team to agree on what a ready story looks like, and this is formalized using a checklist called the definition of ready, and we will cover that topic in the next tutorial. See you soon.